All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our special meeting this afternoon. I am now going to call the meeting to order. And I'd like to first acknowledge our land acknowledgement that we are on the land surrounded by water and originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties agreements between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee and Shawnee, Lenni, and Lenape allied nations to peacefully care and share for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi and Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. To that, members, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda as presented to you today? All right, hearing none, then I will then pass this on to, I believe, Sean. You can introduce our guests. But our meeting here and purpose, the digital strategy and disaster recovery business continuity strategy presentation.
Great, thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, members of council. Welcome to our special meeting. So tonight we're going to welcome the Perry Group. And if you'll recall, last summer, the Perry Group presented our IT service delivery review late in June. And out of that very comprehensive review and document, we've been trying to invoke a lot of the recommendations that came from that study. And two of them were a recommendation that the town undertake both a digital strategy and a business continuity and disaster recovery strategy. So over the course of the summer, we had the opportunity to apply to the municipal modernization program intake 2, and there were several studies that were done for the town under that, and two of them were the two that I just mentioned. And we began the process in the fall, in September and October, for both of these. And we had public engagement for the digital strategy, and council had some workshops and staff had workshops. Similarly, with the BCP and the DR plan, we had a lot of internal conversations on how we do business internally. So tonight we have members from the Perry Group to present to council their findings for both of those studies. So we have Susan Chase and Andy Will and Prasanna Gunasekera here to present on the digital strategy. So that'll be the first part of the presentation, followed by a short Q&A on that. After which Gary Walker is with us to present what he found and his observations with respect to where we should be and where we should be going for our digital strategy and business continuity plan. So with that, Your Worship, with your permission, I'd like to turn it over to Susan to lead the group on the first slide deck.
All right, thank you, Sean, and welcome, Susan and company.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. We're very pleased to be here again. So excited to be able to present these two reports to council today. It's been a lot of exciting work that's been going on in the background and in the foreground. We've actually done quite a bit of engagement as well. So Sean is going to share the slide deck. So we've recently met with council. It wasn't all that long ago, actually, that we met with you. And we talked about the different ways that municipalities are really taking advantage of technology today, and really about changing the way we deliver services to the community and to businesses, to our partners, and to all the different stakeholders. We talked a lot about how customer expectations are actually changing. We talked about how service delivery can actually be cheaper online if it's done correctly. We talked about how digitization can drive things to be even more efficient. So we do these service reviews or process reviews and find opportunities for digitization. We also talked quite a bit about risk management and cybersecurity. So we're pleased to be able to present. Gary's going to do his presentation a little bit about disaster recovery because that really takes a lot of that into account. We also talked about the need for staff attraction and staff retention, that it's very important because they also have the same expectations of digital tools being made available to them. We also talked at the time about council's expectations for digital services, if you recall at that last workshop, some of the opportunities and the priorities. So today I'm really going to share with you some of the results of the engagement and the final opportunities and recommendations. This slide here is showing just an overview in the methodology, the different steps that we took to create this strategy for you. As Sean mentioned, we did do a lot of work in the past year on the IT service review. It gave us a lot of really valuable insight, as well as background information and data, and we were able to build on that. So the service review is actually building really strong foundations, and this digital strategy now will be taking things to the next level. So based on those strong foundations and the changes that are happening, what else can we do? How can we make it even better for staff and the community? So if we go right to the next slide, Sean. Like I said, we're going to be sharing with you mostly the engagement results, but also some of the opportunities and the recommendations. So first of all are the results of the engagement. So next slide, please. Thank you. So we met with council and we asked you several questions, and these were kind of the key questions that we asked. Are we delivering the right service? Are we offering the right services? Sorry, what your priorities were. And we also asked you about council's vision. So this is, I'm sure you all remember it, but basically what council was telling us is we really need to be able to search and look for information, no matter where it is, like if it's on the website or for staff through various tools. We need to be able to look back at records too. So it's not just what's currently available, but we want to see the history of things. That was very important. It was very important for council to be able to have online service requests. So for the community to be able to engage with staff digitally, whether it's service requests, like there's a pothole or a street light that's out, or I have a problem and I need some help. How can we best do that? And what council was telling us is they shouldn't have to call in if they want to do it digitally. So how can we make that available? Council really wanted to see an increased use of data, and that includes the geospatial data. So the GIS data, the geographic data that's out there. Council fully recognized the value of all of that and how it can really help with decision-making. Council said we should really be moving towards paperless. You acknowledge that maybe we can't be completely paper-free, but how can we move more and more so that less paper is exchanging hands, less paper is being produced. Council also wanted to see more about online payments. So we talked about that, how currently there's a couple of different methods for online payments. How can we streamline that and make it even easier for the customers and more consistent? But we also talked quite a bit about what we call here multi-channel. It can't all be digital. There's a lot of customers who, because they don't have decent internet access just yet, although the town is working on that, but they don't have it just yet, or they're not comfortable with it. They're not digitally literate. They don't have that kind of comfort level with using technology. So it was very important to council that we recognize that and made sure that services could be delivered multi-channel, omni-channel, whatever word we want to use. People still have to be able to pick up the phone and call into staff. They have to be able to do that. They need to be able to walk into town hall. So that's very important. So all of those things we took into consideration. We also asked you about your priorities, and it really came down to these two main priorities. And then of course I have the mayor's quote on here. I hope, forgive me please for including it here, but I thought it really set the tone for all the work that we were doing. But your priorities were, it's all about human engagement. It's that user experience. It's let's not just do technology for technology's sake. It's got to be meaningful for the people who are using it. And that was really important to us. And so we kept that in mind as we created this strategy. But it also has to be very sustainable. We don't want to have something we're not going to be able to afford to do next year or 2 years from now. It's got to be able to be sustainable. We have to be able to maintain it in a current state that works very well for everybody involved. But let's not rest on our laurels either. We've got to be able to grow on it. It has to be able to grow with us. I mean, we need it to be able to be scalable. As the community grows, it can grow. Or as the community's needs change, the solution can change as well. That was very important for council. And then the quote, of course, we may not be the biggest, but we want to be the best. That became almost an underlying vision as we worked through. We did end up developing another vision for the project to be used by staff, but this was really a driving force or a guiding vision, if you will, for creating the whole strategy. We asked about council's vision, that one word, if you remember, and these were the words that council shared with us that was very important. It's accuracy, being responsive, Service, that's what it's all about after all. Otherwise, why are we doing this? Adaptability, going back to that continuous improvement and sustainability. And it needs to be intuitive. You know, I remember we talked about when you go to the Amazon store, it's the same experience no matter what it is you do. And you want that same sort of thing for your customers. And of course, it has to be interactive. We want staff to be able to communicate and engage with the public. It's got to be that two-way interaction. And really about continuous involvement. This was one of the councillors, of course, said, I can't do it in one word. So here's my phrase, continuous involvement for the betterment of the municipality. I mean, that's what it's all about. So these all really drove a lot of the development of the strategy. And if we go to the next slide, please, we also asked and talked about very specific opportunities. And these here are some of the ideas that council came up with. And certainly every one of these ideas have been incorporated into the digital strategy. Absolutely everything here, staff agreed. We got the same kind of feedback from staff. I'm not going to read the entire slide here for you, but all of these pieces became part of the strategy. And like I said, we heard the same thing, not only from council, but we heard it from staff and we heard it from the community as well. We want online service requests. We want to be able to have access to the information that we need when we need it. We want it to be shareable. We want to be able to partner with others. And we really want Tecumseh to show and to shine as a leading municipality. So then we also went out to the community, as you know. So if you go to the next slide, please. We used the PlaySpeak site and we called it Tech Online, a digital strategy. And we asked for feedback from the community. We've got an excellent response from the community, certainly. And we had people, they gave us some ideas. They filled out the survey. And we also had an open house. Unfortunately for the open house, I guess we didn't get a whole lot of people join in, but the ones who did join in were very engaged and gave quite a bit of feedback. So I have just a few of the demographics here because it was really interesting. We really did get, this is for the survey as well. We really did get feedback from the demographics we were really targeting. You know, it's that age group between 35 and 65. They were the most represented. We did get one response from somebody under 24. So that was really pretty cool. We don't often see the youth, if you will, participating in these sorts of things. We have people who had lived in town for a number of years. We asked them a number of questions and the majority really do prefer to conduct business with the town through email. It was over 80% had that preference. That's telling us something. That's telling us we really do need to address it. The next, of course, is by phone. If I can't get my information through email or digital means, I want to talk to somebody. And that was the message that we heard loud and clear from them. But through the survey and the responses, we did still hear in-person interactions are important. When I have a real problem or when I have a real question, I want to talk to somebody. I don't want it to go through online and I don't want to get that run around. We also asked people what were the main channels for community that they wanted to hear from the town. Most valued is the website. So even though we hear oftentimes, certainly in my business, I hear oftentimes, oh, the website's kind of going out of fashion, if you will. Not so many people really want it. People are using social media even more. And certainly not so with municipalities. It's about the website. People go there. They see it as that trusted and true source of information. They are also, they like to hear from the town through email or through an e-newsletter. They like PlaySpeak. So that is an engagement tool that the town has acquired and has been using for a while now, and it's working out very well. But it's also very important that they talk with you. So none of this is eliminating the need to engage with their local councillor. That's very important to them. We also asked them which social media tools they were using most often. And given the demographics, no surprise that we're seeing these ones here, Facebook, Twitter, and of course, YouTube. So they're all very engaged in all these different tools and are very happy to see that the town is using them as well. So if you go to the next slide, during the open house itself, we narrowed it down a little bit. We had them focus a little bit more, and I'm not expecting you to read all of these little post-it notes or anything on here. I'm just sharing it with you to say, this shows this is the type of engagement we did get from them. We got a lot of information, a lot of feedback. They asked tough questions, and hopefully we gave them good answers. They're interested in hearing more, and they want to see some follow-up. But we asked them as well, what were their top services that they really wanted to see go online? And it really did help us when we were doing the prioritization of different services. This helped because what they say really does matter. And there's the list right there. Payments and purchases, they want to be able to do that online. They want to see their applications for all the different kinds of permits and licensing online. You do have quite a bit of this online available right now, but there's some improvements to be made. And we talked about that a little bit at the last workshop. They also want to see service requests online, more forms. Interestingly, account management inquiries. So they want to be able to go online and see the status of any of their accounts, not just their tax account, but maybe they're working with the town on a building permit. They want to see the status and the activity that's going on with any of these accounts or interactions that they have with the town. They enjoyed the public engagement. They want to see more of that. And they also want to chat with staff. So they want to hear more from staff. So maybe have those conversations, with that inspector that might be out there or a bylaw officer. Being able to have conversations online is fine, and they're perfectly happy with that, but they just want to know just that little bit more that they can. So then we asked them, if go to the next slide, please. We also asked them about ways to enhance customer service. So how can we improve it? We're looking at digital. Do they have specific ideas on how we can do that? Or do they have any ideas on how we can just generally improve customer service? And they gave us a bunch of information here, a bunch of ideas. A lot of it is about more information. They just want to know more through social media, through the website. They spoke very strongly about how they need to be able to understand it. It can't be government speak. It was very important to them that we do it in terms that they can understand. They're not uneducated people by any stretch of the imagination, but sometimes we do talk government speak, right? So they want to get rid of that and they want to hear it, just the plain truth and what's going on. Most of the other stuff we've kind of already talked about. They're super excited about getting more and more online notifications. So I share all this with you because engagement is really important. As we look at digital services, we believe, at Perry Group anyway, we believe very strongly you have to design your services from the customer's perspective. It's very important for that. Otherwise, they're just simply not going to use it, and you're not going to get the efficiencies and the opportunities. But also because that's what customer service is today. It's about delivering the service that they need, how they need it, and when they need it. So that's why we engage with them. And when we get this kind of feedback, we take it seriously and we work it into the strategies that we develop and the recommendations. We next did, if you go to the next slide, please, part of this project was also taking a couple of the business services that you have, and we put them through a very detailed review. And the next slide, it shares the methodology that we have. So we have to pick the services because there's tons. There's quite a number of services that, of course, the municipality does. So we set some selection criteria, and then we evaluated that, and we selected the specific services, came down to 2 here for a really detailed optimization review. So part of that review, of course, is going through a current state. What is the current business process? How does it work right now? We ask a lot of questions and we actually map it out. This is how it works. This is the next step. Where does that form go? Then who does what with that? And then through that whole process with the team, so the business department, we're able to identify some service gaps, or are there opportunities for improvement? So we really look at it from that customer perspective. We also do it through what we call a good services, well, we don't call it, but we use a good services review. And this was a book that was written by a woman in England, actually, who has really set the standard for good services. What means a good service? So there's a checklist, and we put all the steps through that. And that's how we can identify where there are opportunities for optimization, either through technology or not. And then we're able to design the process to be. This is what it should be. And again, we work with the business department to really identify how this can work. Can it work in your organization? What resources are required? Do you have the capacity? And then we, of course, produce the report. So if you go to the next slide, please. Very briefly, and I know we're going a little bit quick on this, but these were the top services that were identified for potential for digitization. Quite the list here, and there's a whole bunch. And to the right of the screen there is the selection criteria that we used. And things as simple as the annual transaction numbers. There's no sense us spending the time reviewing a process that has just a handful of transactions a year. We want it to have some significance, some real impact. So we also, are these services requested online by customers? Are they requested online by staff, perhaps? You know, maybe staff are struggling with it, the paper process or the as is process. What are the benefits? Is there a possibility for benefits to the customer or to staff? What are the odds of success? Can we do this? Is it going to work out? Is everybody ready for these kind of changes? And then finally, the number of departments benefit. Again, if it's only going to benefit really one small division right now, maybe we need to focus on a larger process for now. So if we go to the next slide, please. So we identified 2 services through that prioritization mechanism with the leadership team in that, and 2 services were reviewed: building permits and inspections, as well as pet licensing. And this is, you know, one teeny tiny little slide. Let me assure you, there's quite a bit of documentation. Like I said, all those process maps that were done, the full report and everything with a lot more details, but just for council's sake here, for building permits and inspections, through the review of that particular process, we identified 50 out of 69 different activities that could be improved or perhaps eliminated, with a potential cost avoidance of over $67,000 a year and customer time savings equating to over $18,000. That's significant. And that's just one process. It's a big process, absolutely, but it is just one. The other process that was reviewed was pet licenses and renewals. We all know those. They're such high profile. You think they're, you know, a very simple process, but they never really are. So with that process, it was identified that 26 out of 44 activities could actually be improved or eliminated. And again, the potential cost avoidance of over $5,000 per year just by implementing these changes, with potential for customer savings there of over $8,000. Again, that's significant. So this is the power of this kind of process review and the optimization and the opportunities for digitization. So these, of course, were also taken into account as we review or develop the strategy. So finally, to the next slide, please, we get to the recommendations. And if you go right to the next slide, please. We identified 4 areas of focus, if you will, for the digital strategy. The first being digital services, which is really all about modernizing the customer experience. How can we make it better for them? And it's that good services and review of the processes. The second is about the digital workplace and collaboration. So this is for staff, making this working environment better for staff, enabling them to collaborate even more, to share documents, to share files, to share information and conversations even easier. It's also about service and process transformation. So the end-to-end automation. We don't want to see that online form on the website, but then it's a manual process in behind. So it really is that end-to-end automation of the whole process. And then finally, of course, we've got data and architecture. So it's the importance of recognizing data as an asset. How is it better integrated so that we know that we have the best source of data, that it's current, it's up to date, it's reliable, and it's stable. That's what we need to know. And then we can start building from that. So we eliminate all the duplication of data, any of the redundancy that might be out there. So on the next slide, using those 4 areas of focus, we've identified very specific projects. And again, this is very high level for council's presentation today. In the report, there's details behind what each of these mean. You can see there's quite a bit, but we have tried to break it down into these 4 areas. And in the report, there's an actual work plan that has a timeline to it. But we have certainly identified everything that has come up in the conversations, from a customer relationship management solution, the digital form transformation, a portal for customers as well. How do we get there? An online payment portal, taking a look at some of the very specific systems that are in use right now. Can they be enhanced? Do they need to be replaced? Can we leverage them even more? And of course, modeling digital services right towards the end there, about further optimization of business services and that end-to-end digitization of services so that you can really take advantage of the technology and the information that's available. Next slide, please. So finally, for me, our recommendations really to council are, we recommend that you adopt this digital strategy. We believe it is truly collaborative. We got a lot of engagement, not only from staff, but from the public and from council, of course. We think it's all about delivering customer service, digitally powered, redesigned services that fit the needs of this particular community. We think, of course, you need to continue to implement and build on the original IT service review plan that Sean referenced earlier that he is working through. In the report, we have principles, digital principles. So things like, it's going to be digital first. We're going to take a look at how can we make this easy for the public to use this system? How can we make it safe and secure? How can we protect the town's assets? So adopt those principles. Really, we recommend that you concentrate on those 4 areas of focus that we just talked about. Leverage the business service optimization and the recommendations contained in that report. And of course, it's very important that we organize and resource the areas very specifically. In the report, we've given some ideas for resourcing and how to improve the capacity of staff. And that builds on some of the recommendations that were in the original ITSR as well about resourcing these projects. And of course, for staff, it's absolutely critical that they continue to measure the success and report back to council so that you know that it's been money well spent and you're achieving the results that you have identified. And that is it for me. I think we'll take a break here and open the floor for questions before Gary gets started on his report. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you very much, Susan. Any questions at this stage? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Your Worship. Great report. There's so much information included in here, and it is a strategy, right? It's not a project, and it's not something that we can, complete and, kind of move on. So it was very detailed. Looking forward to seeing the implementation of, each step, along the way. And for me, looking at the, potential savings, time savings, that'll just compound, year after year for us. So, it was an interesting read, a lot of information, but, looking forward to seeing how each, step along the way is, implemented, and, we as an organization can, reap those benefits ongoing. So thank you.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Altenhoff.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Andy and Susan. Just one of the slide decks you showed regarding the community engagement. Are we on the right track? I think we are. It's kind of a rhetorical question. With regards to being an election year, we were one of the first ones that vote by mail, then we did vote by phone and online voting, and it's become popular. And I think the percentages were high where the residents really enjoy that ease of using that email online type of voting. And so, we are, I think, going ahead with that again this year. And, I think your report kind of reinforces that aspect.
Okay. Councillor or Susan, any response to that, or?
Yeah, I can respond through you, Mayor. I think, Deputy Mayor, you're absolutely right. We're seeing much greater uptake of internet voting, as well as all the other options. I think the critical piece that I take away from voting these days, especially at the municipal level, is we're providing so many options to the customers, so they get to do what really does work for them and for that particular community. So, I mean, I commend the town for being so forward thinking on it, and I'm sure the digital strategy and the ITSR certainly support internet voting.
Councillor Altenhoff.
Thank you, Worship, and to Susan and your colleagues, thank you very much for the presentation, the details. One thing that I was that guy who had that long one-line statement with a whole bunch of words, and I apologize for that, but you're really seeing how continuous improvement and really kind of closing the loop, or taking the information that you've experienced and feeding it back into the system, so that your system can improve is important. Can you comment, or do you have any details? And I apologize if I missed it, but on that feedback loop part, to help the town recognize that, okay, we have something in place, maybe a bit of a deficiency, some issues. How can we improve? As well as, do you have any recommendations on what I'll refer to as kind of the looping process? Should we be doing that once a month? Should we be doing it, maybe perhaps on a minor level once a month, on a major level once a year? Anything of that nature for us?
Through you, Mayor, let me just make sure I understand the question properly. You're talking about looping back to the customers who
Well,
were,
really, enhancing our, the whole, again, our digital strategy and how we're, if you will, digitally presenting ourselves.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to be continuously updating, because what we have now certainly won't suffice 5 years from now, maybe not even 1 or 2 years from now, depending upon what happens. So I'm just kind of curious, on that point.
right.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, I think there's a lot of opportunities for that kind of engagement. I think, and what I've seen a couple of other clients do, is have regular, meaning once or twice a year, workshops, public meetings type of thing with the community to find out, what do you think? How are we doing with our digital services? Are we making it an impression on you? Are we making it better for you? How can we make it even better? What just about all of them do, all of our clients, and we highly recommend it, and I'm sure we recommend it in the ITSR, is there has to be at least an annual report to council in that public forum on the status of these projects. Some you can look at are moving towards online dashboards, and they're providing that kind of feedback to the customers and to council, and usually a digital strategy is included in those updates. So I think there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of ways to do it. You're absolutely right. It's critical that we keep them informed and engaged because they were so good at it. So let's keep it moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? I know the mayor just had to step out, so I'm just taking over the chair for him at this meeting. Councillor Dowie.
Thank you, Acting Worship, and thank you for the presentation. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to, I'm really excited about what's been presented, the opportunity to offer better customer service for our residents, and having a vision and a direction to go forward. Very happy to receive the feedback. I know actually previous to our last meeting, one piece of feedback that I received from a resident was the worry of scope creep, and that we would invest so much in trying to digitize that we would end up offsetting any cost savings. I'm wondering if you might be able to respond to that, or that level of risk that might exist for the investment that we put in versus the return.
Yeah. Okay, through you, Deputy Mayor. I think you're absolutely right. Scope creep is always a challenge and always an issue that has to be very well managed, for sure. One of the recommendations that we had in the ITSR and further endorsed through the digital strategy is the need for effective project management and methodology. So really having somebody who is ultimately responsible to see these projects through, that helps to keep the scope on hand where it's supposed to be. And as well, if you look at several of the recommendations we talked about, doing that business analysis, the service reviews, the service optimization, this really helps to define what it is that is required. And that should also take into account the cost of implementing any of these changes and doing a return on that investment, making sure that it is good value for dollars, because you don't want to be wasting money. It's too easy to get caught up in all the sparkly, shiny, the bells and whistles, especially with technology and apps and things like that. You've got to be really clear on what it is you require and how you're going to implement it, how it's going to benefit the community. It's all about putting that methodology and those processes in place.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from council? Okay, at this point, I believe there is a recommendation for the report there. Just double check here.
So we do have the second half of our presentation, Deputy Mayor. Sorry, I'll just jump right in here. So Gary Walker is going to present the disaster recovery business continuity plan. Perhaps the recommendation would be after
Correct.
that.
I will just ask the clerk if she wants to motion to receive the digital strategy, the first report, before going to the second one.
Yes, if we could receive the one report and then we'll move on to the next. And we do have a report on the agenda this evening that perhaps Sean can speak to as well.
Okay, can I have a motion? Moved by Councillor Dowie, supported by Councillor Houston, to receive the digital strategy, and that the independent third-party final report Tecumseh as prepared by Perry Group Consulting be endorsed, and that further that the independent third-party final report digital strategy, February 2022, as prepared by the peer group, be posted to the town website in accordance with the requirements of the Municipal Modernization Program Intake 2. And furthermore, that administration report back to council with the framework for the implementation of recommendations found in the digital strategy. All in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you. So at this time, Susan, now we'll go on to your second report on the disaster recovery strategy.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My colleague Gary Walker is going to be making this presentation, so I'll call on Gary. And Sean, I guess if you can bring up the screen again. Thank you.
Well, boy, this is not nearly as exciting as that digital strategy, let me tell you, but it is just incredibly important. I mean, the business continuity program, that's going to underpin the delivery of all the services, all the areas of focus that Susan presented in the digital strategy. Business continuity has not become, well, it's become a lot more than just a nice to have, right? It's a must have now for organizations, especially municipalities, who are getting breached at an alarming rate. Ransomware attacks, we've all read the stories. We do a lot of tabletop exercises and cybersecurity sessions, and what's happening out there is it's pretty scary, actually. Small municipalities are getting breached. It's costing them millions of dollars to get data back. So business continuity programs are now essential. And one of the other key things before we sort of kick into the few slides that I have here, I mean, even getting cyber insurance now, they're asking for business continuity programs to be in place, or they will not give you cyber insurance. There was a time not that long ago where you could get away with that. You didn't necessarily have to have the program in place, but now what's happening is because there's so many breaches out there and so many ransomware attacks, the cyber insurance companies are saying, look, we're not even going to give you insurance now unless you can show us that you have these programs in place. So it's become mandatory for the most part. Sean, yeah, you could go to the first slide. So really, what are the objectives? Really, it's all about protecting your reputation. Well, it's one of the big ones for sure, right? By establishing and maintaining these redundant systems, you need to be able to restore your systems. I mean, we talked about all these online services, and it's just sounds great, everything that came out of that digital strategy, but you need to be able to protect those systems and protect those services and be able to restore those services, you know, in an acceptable amount of time, and make sure that employees are able to return to their daily work, right, following an emergency. Business continuity works very, very closely with emergency management, by the way. Emergency management, which is more about life safety. Business continuity is exactly as it sounds, it's about continuing the business in the event of a disruption, right? So the primary objectives is we needed to identify the core business services and define what the impact would be if they were disrupted, right? And then what are the IT requirements, right, to support each service? We live in such a technology-centric world. I mean, the IT component is huge now. It's a big component here. And then from there, you're actually going to develop your BCPDR strategy. Next slide. So what are the benefits? So why are we doing this? Aside from the cybersecurity component, right? You know, getting insurance. And aside from that, I mean, it's a roadmap, right? And it's going to allow you to react effectively, swiftly, right? And to maintain these services. I mean, when you think about it, you know, you rely on just technology to such a great extent, right? And we live in such a technology-centric world, as I was saying, that any kind of a disruption, I mean, I mean, everyone's expecting to be able to access email or access systems all the time, 24/7. So these disruptions are really something that's not acceptable, you know, so much these days, right? So we really need to have a good roadmap in place, you know, with respect to these planning benefits, right? And you're going to build confidence in the public, right, and employees, right? A great benefit of a business continuity plan is that, you know, it gives your staff and the public the assurance on your capabilities to deliver services, as we say here, in times of a disaster, right? The pandemic is a good example, right? COVID. being able to continue to deliver services, at times where, really, there's just such a big disruption we've all been dealing with over the past almost 2 years now, right? So this is a good test for a lot of these plans that have been put in place. You're avoiding excessive downtime, right? I mentioned cyber attacks that are just so common within municipalities. There is data breaches are the big ones for sure. On data loss, it can cause just an unbelievable amount of strife for municipalities. We had one municipality who had a cyber breach last year. Their email was down for a month, right? A month. Think about that. No email for a month. And I can name 3 or 4 that it's cost north of $500,000 to get their data back when they've had a ransomware attack. So I mean, this is what's happening out there. So this is mitigating the risk of any kind of severe impact in the event of one of these types of attacks. Of course, it's not just cyber attacks. It could be a power outage, it could be a flood. It could be human error, right? It could be technical error with hardware or software as well, right? There's all kinds of different possibilities of what would cause an outage that would require some sort of a plan to be put in place. Next slide. Yeah, this is a big one. Business continuity is a program. It's not a project. This is key. This is not a one and done. You come in, you put together a BCP plan, everybody gets excited, it's put in place, and then nobody owns it, right? Right? A business continuity is not a project. It doesn't have, as we say here, it doesn't have a start and stop date, right? The town has to invest in maintaining the plan, keeping it current, keeping it updated and validated. I mean, these things could be out of date in 3 months, 4 months, very easily, if they're not properly maintained, right? And that's quite often a challenge for organizations. You need to be performing annual tabletop exercises. We've done, I can't remember, Sean, I think you might have been at one of the ones we did for the county. We actually, I developed the BCP plan for the county as well. And we do tabletop exercises with them. And we had some of the other local municipalities come in. This was just a year or so ago. But you need to run these tests annually, right? I mean, you have to make sure that the plan is proven, right? You want to provide training and awareness. So these exercises do have to be well structured. Again, one of the most common exercises we do would be a ransomware attack. I'm also a big believer in getting council involved in these types of tests as well. I think it's great for everyone to have awareness, right, of what's going on out there. So the tabletop exercises help you identify what works well and what doesn't work well. And what doesn't work well, those are the gaps that you're going to work on and make sure the next time you do a tabletop exercise that you have all these things addressed. The business, as I said, must be involved, right? That's why I was mentioning council would be, I think it's great when council gets involved, but you need to have key committees such as a crisis management team. I mean, that's in the report that we developed. You need something, you can call it whatever you want, but a crisis management team is a really common name for this team that really is where all the business continuity and even the emergency management are kind of under this crisis management team. And it's members of IT and the business, of course. Next slide. So here's just a sample screenshot. This is a big report. I mean, there's a lot of detail there. We spent a lot of time going through all of our questionnaires. We sent questionnaires out to all the different departments. We asked them to identify their services. Quite often that's a challenge sometimes for departments because they've never really thought of the names of services. So quite often it takes them some time to even think of the name of a service, right? So they come up with a bunch of names for their services. It's easy for fire suppression is a common one. You're looking at a sample here. But once we get all the names of the services from all the different departments, we go through a process where we look at 5 different criteria for each one of the services. It's an impact criteria. It could be a financial impact. It could be a reputational impact, to the municipality. It could be operational. It could be legal or regulatory. And there could be a health and safety impact as well. So these are all, we look at all of these impacts, and from there we look, okay, so what would happen if the town, if the service was down for one day? What would the impact be? So we move on through, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Eventually we have a system that we developed, and this is something that the town is using now. We have quite a few municipalities actually using this system now, where it's online, it's a dashboard. It's going to help you keep your plan current. And it also has an algorithm that was developed. I actually developed the algorithm. I have a certification in business continuity management from the Disaster Recovery Institute. And we developed an algorithm that will calculate what we call the RTO. That's the recovery time objective. So how long can a service be down before it's a severe impact to the municipality? So the system will calculate that based on how we answer the questions with those various impact criteria I mentioned. Fire is always I like to say a no-brainer. If ever there was a service, if ever there was a department that had services that could not be down, it's fire. It's same with the paramedics is another good example. So fire suppression, no shock there. It came back with the highest RTO score, well above all the others at 180. The second in line was emergency management, 125. You can see how the next in line was payroll, which is a very important service, by the way, but you can see that RTO score there was 75. So, when you get into health and safety, life safety, we're talking about catastrophic impact, right? And that's what sort of helps dictate or drive the RTO score. So we go through this process, and we can, for every department, every service within the department, we now have an RTO score. And on top of that, we have a mapping to all of the IT services as well. So now we take the mappings, and then that is what's going to drive and help develop the town's technical disaster recovery plan. Because one thing I will say is that, this is all about money at the end of the day too, because if you wanted to, you could just have all kinds of redundant systems, redundant human resources, right? Double up everywhere, right? And spend all kinds of money having all this redundancy, but maybe you just don't need that redundancy to that extent. So this helps really sort of flush out what the real critical services are. Where do we need that redundancy, and where do we not need that redundancy to such a great extent, right? So it's right sizing your disaster recovery strategy at the end of the day, right? So we look at all of that, and it's a long process, but it really, what you've done here is you've kicked off your business continuity and disaster recovery strategy. Next slide, Sean. So next steps, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's a program, right? So what we're going to do, what needs to be done moving forward, is you want to validate all the recovery times, right? All the departments are going to review all the services and validate all of these times and any adjustments that need to be made. That's the beauty of having the online system that the town's using, because any changes that need to be made is just really a point, click, save, and the plan gets automatically updated. It's quite something. It works really, really well. We're going to develop tabletop exercises, right? So a schedule needs to be developed to initiate annual tabletop exercises, which I mentioned in the previous slide. That's a critical component as well. And we're going to develop, an IT recovery plan. So based on what's come out of this project and what's come out of the report that you have, is going to help drive that plan. Okay, what do you need to invest in to make sure that all of these systems are going to be available? The critical systems are going to be available in the event of a disruption. That's the technical component, really, of a business continuity plan. That's the difference actually between business continuity and disaster recovery. Those are two terms which a lot of people get confused with. Well, business continuity really does focus just on the continuing of the business. The DR piece is the technical component of that, right? The disaster recovery, that's bringing all your technical systems, all your technology back up and running in order to satisfy those recovery time objectives that we talked about earlier. And then you need to develop what we call recovery playbooks. And this is actually a really important process. They're almost like I call them cookbooks as well. I mean, you should be able to pick one up, has step-by-step procedures, step 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth, to recover all of your system. Again, you're trying to make it as easy as possible, right? You're trying to prepare for the worst, right? And hopefully you'll never have to use them. But in the event of a disruption, again, you'll be happy that you have these recovery playbooks, because they really, if they're done right, they certainly come in handy. I mean, these are just a handful of the things that you need to do as the next step. But as I mentioned earlier, it is a program. So this is going to be an ongoing exercise. There's many ways to keep it current, by the way. We have several municipalities, and I'll use one example, is the city of Burlington. The city of Burlington had a pretty extensive, they call it a COOP plan, which is continuity of operations. That's really a BCP-DR plan, and that's public sector tends to use that terminology sometimes more than BCP and DR. But they actually retrofitted and uploaded their entire COOP plan to our portal, and we've gone through a refresh of all of their BIAs. Their process is they have they call it a custodian from each department. So each department basically has a business continuity representative, and that person has access to the portal, and they will go in and do a lot of the updating on their own BCP, right? If somebody leaves the department and they're no longer a point of contact, they'll go in and remove them and maybe add someone else's name. So basically the business and IT have some skin in the game, as they say. It's very important that the business is involved. This is not just about IT. This is not just about technology, even though it's a huge part. It is really all about the business continuing to be able to deliver their services. So the business needs to be heavily involved in this. So you do need to now consider putting, this group together. I mentioned the crisis management team as an example. So as you move forward with the program, you do have a team that's responsible for this, and there might actually be a DR in the report that I put together. I mentioned terms like a DR coordinator, somebody who will actually sort of be responsible for the technical component. But there has to be some ownership around the plan, right? Or it will just become, even though it's in the portal, even though we've made it extremely easy and automated, somebody still has to manage it, right? Somebody still has to go in and make those changes, and it's just very, very important. But this has now become a critical component, as I mentioned, for all municipalities. Certainly our municipal customers. I mentioned the county, also Lakeshore, and of course yourselves all have these great business continuity plans now, and I'm doing some work with the town of Essex, and I'm sure there'll be the next ones that'll put something in place like this as well. But this is becoming very, very common, and it's great to see. I think it's about time that something like this has been given the attention that it deserves. And any questions?
Thank you very much, Gary. This disaster recovery, are there any questions from council on the report? If not, I know, Gary, this one here, obviously the recommendations there, similar. We'll take a motion or a mover and a seconder, but the question I have for Marg, in terms of administratively, when it talks about the third point, administration report back to council, you're talking about how to implement and also how to find the funds in terms of budgeting, if there's any costs involved, and kind of a phase-in plan to kind of do what the report says, because we are endorsing the report, but without any implementation or funds attached. It's just a report that we've endorsed, correct?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to council, and certainly Sean can add to this, but that's correct. You're endorsing the concept and the overarching plan that has been prepared, and it's up to administration to sort out how and when to implement, and then how that factors into the budget. But Sean, if you've got anything there to add, please feel free.
Yeah, thank you, Marg, and again through acting worship to council. Exactly, this is the tip of the iceberg, these two reports, in addition to the IT service review that was done last year. Many recommendations from all of these strategies that have been done. And with that, now some time to just take a breath and start looking at the implementation plan. And as you alluded to, Deputy Mayor, the financial component to do so, right? With implementing some of this, some of it are things that we're doing, we're just formalizing some of what we've already been doing, but not in a formal way. And when you throw in IT governance to this with looking at corporately how we do things instead of in silos, where there's synergies and efficiencies that can be had, that'll be reported back to council as well. But yeah, definitely more to come. This is not ending tonight. This is definitely just the beginning of a lot of good things coming down the road here.
I'll take a motion to, as reported in our agenda there, if we have a mover. Moved by Councillor Dowie, supported by Councillor Altenhoff. And I won't read the report. It's noted there in terms of receiving the report, endorsing it, and as well, it'll be posted on the town Tecumseh website, and then administration will report back to council. So all in favor on that? Opposed? And that carries. Well, thank you again, Susan. Thank you, Andy, Gary, Prasanna, for your time this evening. Again, it's an exciting time when we receive reports like this tonight. It shows that as a town, we're being progressive, and thank administration for engaging everyone and to get us to the point that we're at this time. So at this motion, I guess we'll have a motion to adjourn. We do have another meeting at 5:30, public council meeting. So I believe it's another link, Laura, that we log off and log in. So I'll have a motion to adjourn this meeting if it's okay with council. Moved by Councillor Altenhoff, supported by Councillor Tonio. All in favor? Opposed, and that carries. Again, thank you everyone for your time. Good evening, everyone, and we'll see council at our next Zoom link meeting for 5:30.